Welcome back to the Hard Lunch, where we talk about what it really takes to build something from scratch, whether it's a business, a relationship, or your dream wedding. In this episode, I'm sitting down with the incredible Emily Coyne, founder and creative director of Emily Coyne Events, and a true powerhouse in the world of luxury weddings. Emily's approach to planning is part art, part engineering. She's the type of person who will truck spin bikes up the California coast just to make a bride's vision come true. But she'll also tell you exactly why logistics and systems matter more than any centerpiece that you can ever imagine. What really stuck with me from this conversation was her honesty about what you have to love in order to own a business, and she shares the early days of building Emily Coyne Events and the importance of building a reputation before a brand. If you've ever wondered what it's like to operate at the highest level of the event world, or you're just building something and want a reminder to stay grounded and intentional, this episode will hit home. Let's get into it. This isn't your soft launch. This is the hard launch, where we talk about what it takes to build love, businesses, and everything in between. Emily, you are one of the most detailed and business-minded planners in the industry that I've ever met, and your productions are also iconic. So I am so honored to have you here. We go back a few years now. We met through the planner that actually was, or the venue coordinator that helped with my wedding back in 2019. And I'm so honored and excited to have you here. So let's jump right into it. What
Thank you.
is the craziest thing that a bride has ever asked you to do?
Oh gosh. I think coming from the world of luxury weddings, like truly nothing is crazy. Nothing surprises me. We're in the business of luxury is the element of being able to have choice with things. So we have this thing, we love challenges. We have this thing in the company where we say we don't believe in roadblocks. A roadblock to us where 95% of everyone else will stop and feel that it's a dead end. That is where we get to work. That is where we shine. So, my goodness, from finding a way to bring spin bikes. We had a client who wanted to do a spin class out on the bluffs overlooking the ocean on the north coast of California, which seemed like a simple task, given some of the tasks that we normally do day to day. And we started calling all of the spin studios throughout Northern California. We probably called 40 of them, and they all said, no, no, thank you, but no. So most people probably would have turned away at that point and said, this can't be done. We can't find somebody to do it. But that's where we really, get to work. And we ended up getting the manufacturer of the spin bikes to truck them up from Southern California and unload them for an hour class and then truck them back to Southern California. So I don't know. I don't really think there's anything that I feel is absurd or weird that we get asked. That's just a normal day to day for us.
There's nothing that you wouldn't do. I don't know how you
Truly.
transport those things
Well,
are.
unless it's illegal. But if it's legal, we can do it.
Those things are heavy. I don't know how you transported those. I mean, I'm assuming there was a big team
Truck,
doing that.
big shipping container, freight truck.
Oh my gosh. What's the, craziest day of snafu? Have you seen anything totally go wrong, not as planned? I mean, I feel like wedding planning is somewhat like creating a birth plan. Like, you never are gonna get what you plan for. There's always something that goes wrong, and what's the craziest thing you've seen?
Well, we certainly have seen a lot of really unfortunate situations with COVID and, postponements and venues. We've had venues burned down and we've had to completely change venues. I've had a groom pass out in the middle of the ceremony. So there have been some truly horrendous emergency situations like that we have faced. In terms of the thing that always goes wrong on a wedding day, if it's properly planned, it doesn't. Our weddings don't have things go wrong, barring an emergency, because we put in the time and care to make sure everything's accounted for.
Wait a minute. Someone passed out, while she was walking down the aisle?
It was actually while the ceremony was taking place, and yes, the groom passed out as they were exchanging rings. Ring dropped off a three-story building. And we called the paramedics. We got the cocktail reception started for the guests, so we wanted to keep everyone entertained. He was fine. We were able to restart the ceremony again about 35 minutes later. Low blood sugar, probably locked his knees. So all ended well in that scenario, and we did find that ring. But yes, in the moment, it was one of those things that make you jump.
Oh my god, I can imagine. I feel like that's a storyline for a movie. That has to be, like, something that does not happen often, especially
Probably
when the ring.
not often. That was a once for me. Hopefully, it
Yeah.
will stay a once.
Oh my goodness. You gotta tell me what the most lavish wedding is that you plan. I know you plan some lavish ones. What's the most, like, over the top, most, highest budget, lavish wedding that you've produced?
Um, and that's an interesting question. To me, it's truly not about how much someone is spending and it being, oh, the most flowers or the most lavish. Like, we want guests to leave weddings saying, that was the best wedding that I've ever been to because I had so much fun. I just enjoyed myself immensely. And that doesn't always mean that it was the most over the top. And I actually tell clients very frequently when we're doing consultations, we're not necessarily the planner to hire if you want to just throw, all of your money into flowers. I love a good floral budget, of course, but to me, what makes an incredible wedding, and these can be some of our lower budget or some of our higher budget weddings, it's about how you are really making it authentic to the couple. You're really personalizing the experience for guests. You're making everyone that's there feel pampered and taken care of, and there's surprise and delight moments throughout. So, it's not about it being the most lavish, it's about it being the most intentional. And I think that's what makes the difference.
I totally agree. I mean, I feel like that's the approach I took, and I think that's the approach everybody should take because it's just creating an environment that is memorable, and it doesn't really matter what the level of lavishness, if that's a word, is, but rather the experience and the things that people remember, which is like the people, the company, the music, the food, and just like making
Completely.
sure that it's just
Yeah.
an environment that people want to spend several hours in, if not a full weekend in. So I totally
Absolutely.
agree.
And from weddings that we've planned that have been a few 100,000 to a few million, I can't say that, there's one, oh, the most expensive one that we've ever planned. Um, it was better, that it had more elements, it had a bigger guest count, it had perhaps had a lot more customization, but again, it's not about that, and each client is going to have an amount that they feel is appropriate. Like, I think being successful in planning a wonderful wedding is about making sure that you found the balance in that too. Did they feel really good about what they invested and really great about what they got for it?
Totally. I couldn't agree more. Okay, I want to rewind it back a little bit. Walk me through how you stood up your business. You have been doing this for some time now, and I'm super curious about the early days, how you got your business going. Walk me through some of that early initial time.
Going way back, I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I would have my own business from as long as I can remember as a child. And my father was an architect and developer, had his own business, and my mom was an interior designer. So I grew up surrounded by a lot of elements that come into play with what I do now. I was also very nerdy and completely obsessed with Emily Post's book of etiquette. I loved poring over how to set a dinner table and what spoon you're supposed to use for what dishes, and setting parties for my parents. It was in me. I drew houses and floor plans when I was a child. Um, I never really set out to be an event planner. That came later in life as I was working in hospitality, and I started in restaurants and then resorts and ended up having the opportunity to work at some of the most incredible resorts in the world. And throughout all of that, I loved this hospitality world that I was in, but I did always still know that eventually I wanted my own company. What exactly that was not really as significant about as the fact that I knew I wanted a business that was mine, that I could grow, that I could be creative and creative artistically, but also creative logistically and with problem solving and critical thinking. And so, eventually, my world in hospitality morphed from corporate events to social and weddings. And I really found that I loved the weddings and the couples that I was getting to work with. Um, and 8 years ago, ended up deciding to leave that corporate world and finally launch ECE. And absolutely, from the minute I did it, I this was what I was meant to do. And it just ties together so much of what has been a part of my whole life, and I never even realized it until all these pieces tied together.
That's amazing. I feel like you had the creative gene in you or the creative itch that kind of like forced you to find what is meant for you. And I feel like some people have that but maybe struggle finding like what is that outlet, how to find that outlet or how to turn that like
Well,
creative passion into a business. So I'm curious what advice might you have for somebody who like
mm,
has a passion or is trying to maybe figure out how to turn a passion into a business and like get started?
Okay, I think my first piece of advice is make sure you actually want to own a business first and foremost. That is way more critical than like, I want to have a job doing what I'm passionate about. If you want to just be doing what you're passionate about, go and find someone that you really respect and work for them. If you want to own a business and run a company, then, go down that path and, do it in something that you are passionate about. But the thing you have to be most passionate about is running a business and owning a company, not specifically the thing that you're doing in it.
I totally agree because I think anyone that has not had a business yet might underestimate the amount of like logistical and like biz admin stuff and like operational stuff that goes into it. And that is almost a bigger part of the day to day than the creative aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Uh, once you're the owner and the founder or, the main person. So, I myself have learned how much time is required to go into like ops and administrative stuff. And it's just wild because, you think, you might be good at the creative side, but you also need to be good at the business side and like running operations.
100%. And you need to love building structure and motivating teams and really thinking bigger picture, how can you over deliver? And and of course you're thinking a lot about finances and taxes and legal things and inventory and office spaces and a lot of the business admin. But really it's about if you are trying to build a team or a company, there's so much of a foundation, like building of that infrastructure that you're doing. And a lot of my time and energy is going into our clients and our weddings, what we're actually doing, but also into all of the structure that makes all of that possible. We could not do the level of weddings that we do without a team, and we could not do it well without systems and processes and checks and balances and no single point of failure. And those are all of the things that your mind needs to be really critical about. It ties in really nicely with event planning because in the world of an event itself, you have to be thinking about all of those things. But wedding planning is people think wedding planning is all about cake tastings and flowers and the fun and pretty that you get to be around all the time. And it's all about design. No, a wedding designer gets to focus a lot on design. A wedding planner is way more than that in so many other capacities. Design is such a small fraction.
100%. And I think you're totally right. It's a myth that has to get busted at some
Yeah.
point because there's just so much more that goes into the planning piece of it, and it can easily go unseen. How did you start getting clients? Like, what was your first client, and how did you build that into your, client base that you have today?
Very first client was a referral from someone else in the industry, someone that I had confided in a bit that I was wanting to launch my own company. And I think another thing in business is that reputation is everything. Um, I started my company in Napa Valley, and we're still based in Napa Valley, although we travel globally now. But it's a small valley here, and I had already spent 10 years in this small market developing a reputation. So people knew me, they knew how I worked, my work ethic, and I didn't even have a website in my whole first year in business. It was 100% referrals. Once I announced to the industry that I was open for business, the inquiries started flowing in, and I didn't even have time to do marketing or a website. So I think that is a huge part of really what allowed me to become successful. Is that I had already built a huge foundation of people who wanted to work with us and knew that working with us would be a really great thing and a great experience and something that they could feel proud of recommending to clients.
I think that parallels into, like, businesses nowadays that are, and I think there's been a shift towards this, towards what you essentially did years ago, which is organic versus paid advertising, right? Like, you organically built up your client base through word of mouth, through reputation building, and that's what people nowadays are doing on socials organically, and it's just easier to do than probably, several years back, but, like, I think there's a huge shift in organically building up clients, building up organically, business users or whatever it is that you're building up, because that actually gets you a lot further than potentially spending money on, like,
And I
marketing or
think there's
branding.
a huge shift right now towards trust and transparency
Yes,
being really crucial. There's so much access to information that couples have now, and so much inspiration out there with Instagram and Pinterest and AI now, and um that's all fantastic, but in an industry that is just so overly saturated with all of that, I'm starting to see that people are kind of coming back to the roots of like, who can we truly trust and respect here? And so I think it's very important that you don't just jump to all of the pretty and the marketing and the advertising. Like, it's a small industry. Like, build your reputation in it.
totally. I think that's a good segue into my next question. I'm curious how you think tech might be evolving the way you work with clients, and where do you see that moving in, 5, 10 years from now, or evolving in terms of, how you might be leveraging different platforms, or how the clients might be leveraging different platforms, or just how you guys work together.
Hmm. I mean, gosh, there are so many resources for people now. 15 years ago, you really relied completely on your planner or your florist to show you what was possible. And now there's a lot of research that people can do on their own. I think it's overwhelming to start with. And really, unfortunately, there's a lot of bad information out there. So I think we're kind of in this phase. It's a very exciting phase where there is so much that's coming with tech and continuing to build daily that can be an amazing tool for couples who don't have planners, for us in the planning world. I think people also need to be extra vigilant right now about how they're vetting things. And that kind of ties back into the trust. But I think tech is making knowledge accessible to people in a really new and exciting way. I don't think that tech is going to take the place of or change true hospitality in the wedding planning space. But I do think that all of the tools that are being developed can make it really possible for professionals to, push bounds even farther, and also make it simpler for couples who maybe are planning on their own and not using professionals or wedding planner, for them to stay organized and, become informed during the process.
Totally. I feel like that's exactly, I mean, it's the angle that we've always taken at Gia, right? Like there's always going to be a need for a human planner, but making it more accessible and making it more accessible for people who are, either not hiring planners, don't have the budget to hire one,
Sure.
or just streamlining the process and how you work with a planner, right? Like there's always better ways that you can do things. And I think if you don't lean into that or fight against it, you might fall behind because it's going to happen, right? Like it's just how sort of the evolution of technology works. So I totally, totally agree with that. Um, how I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'd love to know kind of how you handle vetting clients and knowing if a client is a good fit for you and your company.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I Something that couples probably don't often think of much, but we are interviewing them at the same time that they're interviewing us, and I think that finding the right fit is so crucial, because this entire relationship for the next 9 to 12 to 18 months that you're planning, that planner is your single point of contact, or at the very least, your main point of contact. And it has to be a relationship that's built on trust and respect. And that goes both ways. We really want to make sure that we are attracting couples who believe in and value the things that we believe in. For us, a huge part of this is my background, hospitality. How you're making your guests feel, how you're taking care of people, how we're making this authentic to who you are. We want to take a lot of inspiration from our couples in the process. So, for us, the ideal client is not necessarily someone who wants to just say, here's my budget, plan it all, and I'll show up. We certainly want input from our couples, and we want to make sure that it feels really authentic to who they are. We're doing all of the nitty gritty legwork, but we still want to work with people who care about this process, and they want to be involved in some capacity. And as I was touching on a little bit earlier, we're not the planner to go to if you just want to prioritize one thing at the expense of everything else. Of course, people have different priority levels, and based on each couple or family's priorities, we're shifting how we recommend that they allocate their budget. But if someone comes in and says, like, I care about absolutely nothing, but the bar, and, it doesn't matter, guests don't need food, they don't need a comfortable place to sit, we don't care how the transportation works, so you just want to put all the money into the bar. Like, that doesn't create an experience overall that guests are going to enjoy and have fun in. And it won't matter if you did these crazy molecular gastronomy cocktails and champagne pouring from fountains, and if everything else about the wedding doesn't feel like it's in line with that. So we ask a lot of questions, and we also share very openly about things that we believe in, and we believe in logistics and really setting things up for success to get the most value out of everything you're investing in, and properly planning, having the right size team, putting the hours in to do the nitty gritty. Like, if someone doesn't respect that process, then that's not necessarily going to be a great fit. We won't be a great fit for them. So I think it's about learning and sharing openly. I'm a kind of all cards on the table. I'm not the person that I'm gonna lie to you about, oh, you want to spend X and you're showing me pictures that I know is 5 times what you want to spend. Like, there's no point in me getting you in the door and hooking you because I know down the road you'll spend more money. That's just gonna make you mad at me down the road. Like, I'd rather we just lay everything out pretty openly to begin with.
I think that's smart because I think oftentimes expectations are mismatched, but people move forward anyways. And I think this creates this not great experience. But have you had an instance where someone wanted to go forward with you, but you knew that it wasn't a right fit and you had to say no?
Um, you know, God, trying to think if we ever have. I've certainly encountered some situations in conversations where I was starting to feel that we probably weren't what they were really looking for. Um, and I don't think I've ever reached the point where I have had to completely turn someone away. I would rather reach that point in a more delicate way and just help. It may take a little bit more time and effort, but I would rather have a little bit more of a conversation to just educate them. And if I educate them more about the things we are going to do and the processes that, we will care about investing in their wedding, and that's not feeling like something that they care about, they will eventually realize that and kind of go in a different direction themselves. And on the other hand, when we do share about our processes for the client who is the right fit, they go crazy for it. They love it. They, want more of what we're starting to show them because they think about hospitality and taking their guests, taking care of their guests in the same way that we do.
Exactly. I think that also just goes to show that, that you, since you never had really an instance where it's ended in maybe a mismatch, that you are attracting the right clients to begin with, which is also difficult to do, especially when you're starting out. But uh, how have you like managed to kind of make sure that you're curating the right type of clients that are reaching out to your business and that it's like, people that are likely going to be a good fit from everything, from a budget perspective all the way to kind of style, taste, and process.
Honestly, um, you have to just not be afraid to jump off a cliff and take risks, and don't let fear drive you into taking the wrong clients or compromising the things that you know are important. If you start to do that, this scarcity mindset, then you ultimately are going to end up with clients who are not aligned because you are trying to be all things to all people. And sure, there have been moments where it would have been great to sign that contract and get another book of wedding on the books and the financial stability that came with that. But um my father taught me to just really not be afraid, to take risks and stay strong and grounded. And at the end of the day, like, I know that I'm going to be fine. I am scrappy, and I would rather make sure that we work with people who honestly, we love working with our clients. I have so many amazing memories and relationships that have been built with clients we've worked with over the years, and I think you just have to stay true to what you are trying to sell people, and not try to be all things to all people.
I think that's so important. And that goes really for any business that you're building in any industry is like, don't try to please everyone. You're not going to be able to. And just stay true to sort of what you're out to get, like whether it's a specific client or a specific product vision or whatever that is. Because as soon as you start swaying from that, you just start going automatically down the path of trying to please everyone because you yourself don't know like what's at the core. You kind of lost
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
So, I
definitely.
totally agree.
And I'm not afraid to lay things on the table. Like, do you be I honestly, the best negotiations come from honesty and people just being, unemotionally honest and laying out what their goals are, what they're trying to get. No one trying to hide or, keep a card up their sleeve or something like that, but just truly what are you about? What are we about? Where does this align? Where does it not align? How can we find a win-win? And, you know, you either find a win-win or you don't. And I don't think you should push something that's not going to be a win-win.
Totally, totally agree. Before I move on to the next topic, I'm curious, have you ever had a client that was totally like their style made you cringe and totally ended up not being your aesthetic, your style, but in a completely different direction? And how
Yeah,
did you
a
handle
great question. And I think one of the things that we have always been really proud of is that we don't have clients come to us for a specific style per se. I want our designs to be very reflective of the couple and how would they entertain in their own home. And so our designs are very different. You will see consistency in the logistics of it, or we do design with a really residential feel where we're thinking through how will guests utilize this furniture in the space? Like, how do you entertain in this area? How do pieces fit together on a floor plan and spatial planning? But no, I have never found myself in a situation where a client's tastes have just made me cringe. But probably because, you know, we ended up not signing with that client in the first place if it was really, that bad of a mix match. But I love being able to dive into something really colorful, really classic, really fun and playful, or super chic and sophisticated and formal. Like, the variety is very exciting for me.
Yeah, I think that's a skill, like being able to kind of like be a chameleon in the sense that you can kind of adapt to the client's taste and style, but in a way that still makes it, aligned to your aesthetic or like the business aesthetic or like a level of kind of some level of aesthetic that you may hold for yourself in the business, right? Kind of blending those two things together.
Definitely.
Okay, so for any 2026 brides watching, I want to switch gears over to like kind of tips and tricks that they might want to know. So what is a vendor that couples usually forget to budget for or kind of gets overlooked?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently, and not a vendor specifically, but the single biggest mistake that people make is they book the venue and commit to their venue and food and beverage without first thinking through the rest of their vision and how their budget is going to be allocated to the rest of their vision. And their vision, including not just things like the table linens and chairs and whether you're going to have a band or a DJ, but also your guest count size and, just as a whole, what this day or weekend is going to look like. Um, so many times at this point, most of our clients are coming to us and they have not found a venue, and we're helping them with the venue search and planning process. But so many times couples are booking their venue first and then they go out and find a planner, day of coordinator. um, and what's so important is before you sign any contracts, especially that venue one, make sure that you sit down and you have gotten numbers, real legitimate numbers from floral and the photo booth and the music and the lighting and all those things, and find the most robust spreadsheet for budgeting that you can, or ask 10 of your friends, and just really make sure that you're thinking through all of those nice to haves, what ifs. Because even something like a photo booth that most people may not think of until a couple months before the wedding, then they really want it. They have no idea at that point what it's actually going to cost them. Is this a $200 expense or is this a $2,000 expense? And if you have not allocated things that you want from the very beginning, then you are guaranteed to go over budget. And you don't have to go over budget. You really can, as long as you make sure that you think through all these things from the beginning. And maybe that means your guest count gets adjusted. The difference of 10 guests, one way or the other, who you invite could very easily mean the difference between having the videographer or not having the videographer.
Totally. They can ask their friends or they can ask Gia. I have
And
the
they could ask
funds.
Gia, yes.
Was the perfect way for them to get a full picture of, but you're right? Like, they need the full picture in order to make a first decision, and it can be quite confusing because, to your earlier point, there's so much information out there, and how do you get the accurate sense of, like, what these things will cost for your anticipated guest count? So, get that information however you're getting it, whether it's Gia, friends, other places, right? Like, get the information before you sign a contract. I fell into this trap. I signed my first contract. It was not the venue, it was actually band because I went to my friend's wedding and saw this band and I was like, I have to have him. So I literally signed the contract without having a venue, without having a planner, without having anything else. And it was a $25,000 contract for the band. And I was like, had no idea what my budget was going to be or how that fits into my budget. And I was that girl that you just described. I fell into like going crazily over budget because I had signed that contract before I knew anything. And I definitely would have done things differently. So what is the most like overlooked design element? Like, what do you feel from a design perspective really adds to the atmosphere and to the environment that oftentimes maybe people wouldn't think
Yeah.
makes a
I think one of the biggest things that people often think, "Oh, I'll just use these from the venue," or "It doesn't really matter," but it actually makes a really significant impact is chairs. So, chairs, whether this is the dining chair or the ceremony chair, it is taking up a really huge volume of space overall in the design. You walk into a room and 50% of what you may be seeing is the chair. And you and it's also something the guests are sitting in when they're at dinner, they're sitting in this chair for a couple of hours. So it's not just something that ties into aesthetic and design, but it also ties into guest comfort. And I think that it's better to make sure you are either booking a venue where you look at the chair that they are going to provide to you, not just the one in their brochures, because 9 times out of 10s, all those pretty pictures, those are rentals. So if they're providing you chairs, and I hear this from people all the time, "Oh yeah, we don't need to worry about chairs, like the venue provides them." Well, do you know what those chairs actually look like? Have you sat in them? If they're a white folding chair and you're trying to put that at a dinner table, do you realize that that actually sits at a couple inches lower than a standard dining height chair? So you end up having the table feeling like it's kind of up on your chest, which is not a very comfortable or elegant dining experience. So think about the chairs.
I could not agree more, and it's so funny because I've said this for years since I've sort of like been in the weddings and event space, just building Gia and all the things. Show me a picture of a wedding, and I will tell you whether they invested in that event by just the chairs. And it is like the most critical element. And anytime I think of design or wedding, I just think about the chairs because I think you're right. People underestimate how impactful a, a white folding chair, or even some of the chairs that are lower budget that I've seen, how impactful it can be to like invest a little more in that and really create a an environment with a more with a higher budget chair. And at my wedding, people walked away noticing the chairs. They're like, "We feel like we're at a restoration hardware like showroom and these chairs are so beautiful." And I was like, "Thank you. This means a lot," because I actually knew and wanted an environment where the chairs were,
Good for
a
you.
separate
Yeah.
the design.
And I think if you invest in that, then you don't need to do the stacked china plate look, or maybe there are some pieces, maybe you use the glassware from the venue or use their flatware and glassware and just rent a nice charger plate. It's not going to all of that tabletop is not going to give you nearly as much bang for your buck as the chair.
Totally. Could not agree more, and I think everyone needs to pay attention to that tip because pay attention to your chairs, your event, and your guests will thank you for it. Um, okay, a couple more questions before we end with rapid fire questions. How do you get the vision out of like your client's head, right? I'm sure they have something in their head and they're trying to communicate that to you and they probably don't know design too well or they don't know it well enough to be able to like know the lingo or describe what they have in their head. So How do you get it out of them?
It's true, and I think that visuals are really important here, and also stepping outside of the wedding space. We have a process that dives into what makes people tick, and in areas like where they like to stay, what they like to do for fun, how do they entertain in their own homes? Is it smaller dinner parties where everyone's gathered around the kitchen table, or is it the backyard barbecue? Do they love to have lots of people over for cocktail receptions or more one on one? Where do they shop? Where do they eat? Where do they travel? What's their favorite hotel that they've ever stayed in? What kind of artwork do they have on their walls in their own home? These are ways that help us dive into what they really love in an environment, their homes, that they feel comfortable and grounded, and they love being in that space. And so I think that that then helps us understand and design around what's going to feel really authentic to the two of them. We certainly look at visuals in the wedding space that can help determine what is their desire for the scale of florals. If you look at a floral arch that is this size versus this size, couples will have very different reactions. One may say, oh, that's way too minuscule, and the other may say, that's perfect. And this one is way too big. I would never want something that was that ostentatious. So it's really important, rather than just using words, to actually look at colors and textures and pictures together. One person's idea of romantic may be another person's idea of minimalist. So I think some of those adjectives that we often toss around in the wedding space are not as helpful as just diving into things outside of the wedding space.
Totally. I think it's probably not intuitive to most people that like where you shop or what your home looks like is often how you can translate your style or decor of your wedding day because it really reflects your overall. Do you want to pause? Are you okay? No, you're fine. Take a minute.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I got like some little piece of dust. I was like,
Okay.
okay, just hit mute and then you can cough while she talks.
That's okay. We can. I'll cut it out.
Okay, fun bit.
Are
We're
you okay?
back.
Okay. Okay. Um. Yeah, I was just saying, I think it's really interesting because people oftentimes probably not intuitively think about, don't think about the fact that where they shop or what their home looks like can easily translate into the style or decor of their wedding
Sure.
day. Yeah. Um, any tricks for keeping the aesthetic overall cohesive? Because there could be oftentimes many moments in the wedding. There could be I mean, there are different elements, within the actual decor, whether it's in the ceremony or the reception. So how do you think about keeping it all cohesive throughout the entire event
Yeah.
and within each of those moments?
I think one of the most important things is that you need to stay pretty much at the same level with everything that you're choosing. So let me relate this to a car for a minute. You would not take a Honda steering wheel and put it into a Ferrari. Everything in the Ferrari would be at a certain caliber, a certain, level of detail. Um, and I think that the moment you go too far outside of the level that you're at for your biggest priority things, it the more things are going to start to stand out like a sore thumb. Don't have a big, beautiful rented bar with this big, tall backdrop behind it and shelving and candles. If then you're going to put the dessert bar on an 8-foot folding table with a linen, that feels really disconnected. And one feels very luxury and the other feels very entry level. So I think it's better to maybe scale back a little bit from that bar, get the big, beautiful bar, that's your priority. But maybe let's skip the bar back behind it in order to do a pretty little shelving unit for, the dessert bar. It doesn't mean that you have to go all out for that dessert bar, but you're balancing the levels a little bit more. That's going to help you keep things cohesive throughout.
That makes total sense. I think having those trade-offs really clearly in your mind, in terms of where you can cut, but still create a cohesive aesthetic and overall feel for the event without like completely deprioritizing or ignoring some elements that might still be important. Okay, quick rapid fire questions. Most overrated wedding trend that you have been seeing maybe this between last year and this year.
Ah, gosh, people might get mad at me for this, but I think a content creator. Um, it's something that we've seen couples invest in, and at at the end of the day, they're getting back their professional images, and those are the ones that everybody's using. So you're getting a lot of, this raw content back, but then you want the pictures where you look best, where it's the most flattering angle. And those are typically the professional ones.
It's interesting because I have been seeing this wave of wedding content creators popping up or kind of blowing up. And I'm sure people are hiring them on. I personally did not have one, so I don't even know what that looks like or how they even operate within the event. But agree that the professional photos are what you're gonna want to
Hang on your
probably
walls and put in your
hang up
photo
on.
albums. Yeah.
Exactly. Most underrated wedding detail, which you may have already answered, but if there's anything else, what is it?
I mean, I think basic guest comfort is something that you really need to think about. Heat, cold, comfortable chairs, music being too loud that they can't even talk at dinner, abrasive lighting. You want to just think about those things that tie into basic guest comfort and don't ignore them.
I totally agree. There have been weddings where, as a guest, I was freezing or melting, and no umbrellas or no nothing. And it becomes you're only focused as the guest on the fact that you're uncomfortable. And you completely miss the entire event itself. Okay, your signature save the day planner move. We've got to know.
Oh, I am not sharing that one. What I will leave you with is here's a tip to really make your aesthetic stay cohesive, and don't break the bank with it. So when you do choose that venue, lean into the color palette and the aesthetic that already exists at that venue. If you try to come in and completely change a space or work against that color palette, you can certainly do so, but it's going to cost you a lot more money to make it feel impactful. And I'm when I say like find a venue that you can lean into, I'm not just talking about, oh, beautiful gardens or their outdoor space. That's easy. That's a very neutral, beautiful canvas. I'm talking about things like, do they have a carpet that is really distinct? Um, then take those colors from the carpet and use that as the foundation for your color palette. Do they have crossback chairs that they are providing? Okay, then lean into a modern farmhouse aesthetic. Don't try to do a wabi-sabi look. Don't try to do a formal look or a southern look and, use their crossback chairs. Or, of course you could rent chairs, but again, what I'm talking about here is how can you make your budget go further and make it look like the wedding was more designed? Lean into what's already there. If they have stoneware china, then lean into that. And that's where, okay, you can do a wabi sabi or Japandi kind of style and make sure things are pairing with that stoneware china. If they have really contemporary furniture, really clean lines, and the space is more modern, then make your wedding design modern with clean lines. Don't try to do curves and arched florals. Lean into what is already there. It's going to make your budget go further.
Totally agree. And I think what oftentimes gets over or maybe people have a harder time wrapping their mind around is that if you're getting a venue with just four walls, you're going to have to rent everything. And that likely is going to be a larger budget than like a venue that maybe is a little bit more inclusive. But to your point, if it is a venue that's more inclusive, make sure that you're using things that are part of the aesthetic that you're going for because if you're planning on using what they have,
Yeah.
oftentimes it's something that may not at all align with your style or your
Yeah,
aesthetic. Totally.
and you can design a tabletop, and you have flowers and china and silverware and glassware on that. If you use all of the venue's things, but then you put on florals and you're trying to change the color palette, through the florals or the aesthetic through the florals, you're gonna have to make those florals so much bigger just to make the same impact in terms of overall designs. If you said, okay, they have this beautiful taupe stoneware plate and a brushed nickel flatware, we're going to lean into that. And we can now do smaller floral arrangements. But as a whole, the table actually looks like you put more money and thought into it because you're leaning into those colors and those finishes that are already at the venue.
Exactly. Okay, if you won't tell us your save the day planner move, what is the one thing that the brides need to make sure they pack, or an emergency kit that might need to be on site? Like what is it that needs to be there to make sure that the bride is covered and she's good?
Our emergency kit has over 300 items in it. So,
300 items. Oh my gosh.
let's see, what are
Bride
some
not gonna be able
things
to
that
pack that
get
herself.
used a lot? Um, Here's a quick tip for you. Have some chalk, some white chalk, just like sidewalk chalk. If anything does spill on the dress, this is a really great way to cover any stains.
Wow. That's a great tip. I'm sure people are gonna start packing that because I did not know that chalk does that. So that's great. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you.